Senator McCain is not with us today. He's not here at this meeting, but I can assure you if he were, the first thing he'd come out with, Mr. Fahey, is acquisition. He'd remind us of what's happened in the past, and I'm particularly sensitive to it, being from Oklahoma, somewhat familiar with our ground operations, what we're supposed to be doing. Senator McCain would remind us that we spent over $2 billion on the Crusader, junked that program, lost it, then went into the Future Combat System. That was a $20 billion loss. And, you know, this is something that we, and this isn't new to any of us here. I can remember talking about this way back when I was in the House Armed Services Committee, and we're talking about 20 years ago. So you're the guy that's there to come up with all the new ideas. Anything off the top of your head you want to share with us? Very short.
Yeah, yes, sir. I mean, Senator, so I've seen hundreds of programs, so I know what's good and what's bad. I will tell you that I really believe the setup of the R&E and a lot of the direction from this committee of prototyping early and often to drive out risks early is a big part of that. Because what you see in a lot of these programs is the requirement, we're over-ambitious with the requirement we're given in the execution. So if you drive, the key is driving out risks early and often, and prototyping is a big part of that. Yeah.
Well, that's good, and I'd like, for the record, maybe to come into some detail on how you plan to attack this, because, again, this is a tough one. It's one that should have been done a long time ago, and I think you have the right background to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
There's a controversial thing that came out just the other day, and it's one that I feel very, very strongly about, and that is keeping aggressively open Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. You know, I can remember people complaining about it, and there are people here on this committee who don't agree with this position, but I do, and I think it's very important. People don't understand the differences, Mr. Nye, between combatants, enemy combatants, and criminals. They're not one and the same. And so we're limited in the resources we can use. The question I would ask you is, how will you support the Secretary of Defense and provide independent legal advice while maintaining our lawful detention of enemy combatants at Gitmo?
Senator, I had a little bit of experience in that when I previously served in the Pentagon, in the Office of General Counsel, and the Department of Defense. The detainee matters were part of my responsibilities. And so we did provide that sort of advice to Deputy Secretary of Defense England at the time, and I would continue to provide that advice in a way that's consistent with international law and, more importantly, in some respects, the domestic law that's been refined over the past decade regarding our detainee facilities. The President has said recently in his executive order that Gitmo is to remain in operation. Mm-hmm. It is safe, humane, secure, and legal operation, and I will consult and advise the Secretary to complete any mission that he sees necessary in how we use Gitmo.
Well, I'd also add that 9 years ago, in the previous administration, there was an effort by the President Obama at that time to close it, and we stopped that from happening in this committee. And so those are sentiments that are here. The last thing I want to mention would be to you, Ms. Gordon-Haggerty, and that is when you look at the nuclear triad, the things that you're going to be dealing with, is there anything further you didn't mention in your opening statement as to how we're going to attack this, and where are our weaknesses as you see them right now that you're going to be dealing with?
Senator Inhofe, I think the biggest obstacle that we have ahead of us is sustained and robust funding. We need to ensure that we have
predictable,
thank you, predictable funding for ensuring the maintenance of the current stockpile and all of the future needs that are headed upon us, especially those that are laid out in the nuclear posture review.
Yes, very good.